Chuck Jones was born on the 21st of September in 1912. His father was a struggling businessman, which meant that they always had pencils and paper laying around for him and his siblings to use. So Chuck ended up drawing or reading most of his childhood, since his father looked for homes that had a huge book collection when moving around the country. Jones cites Mark Twain as his favorite author many times. His description of a coyote even inspired the design and personality of Wile E. Coyote later in Chuck's career. Jones joined the Schlesinger studio in 1933 as an assistant animator. He later got promoted to the role of animator in 1935. There he worked in Tex Avery's unit with Bob Clampett, Sid Sutherland, and Virgil Ross. Since there was no space for Avery's unit in the main Schlesinger studio, they were moved into a broken down building dubbed Termite Terrace. He began his career as a director in 1938 after one of the directors, Frank Tashlin, left the studio, so Tashlin's old unit was assigned to him. But before that, he co-directed some shorts with Bob Clampett and Up Iwerks, who was known for designing Mickey Mouse. The first few cartoons Chuck directed were very Disney-like, sometimes involving a mouse named Sniffles. They weren't all that well received for lacking the classic Warner Bros. Brand humor brought in by legends like Tex Avery or Friz Freleng.
But Chuck Jones, unfortunately, I think, try to be very cute and very, very precise about his gags. I don't know. I like Friz Freleng's timing, or like Tex Avery.
Chuck and his fans often say that he really started making funny cartoons after his 1942 cartoon, The Draft Horse, which involved the horse trying to get drafted into the army.
What I discovered when I was a draft horse, that I could make people laugh and not just be amused. That's a heady thing. Yeah, right. You get so you want to make them laugh, at least make yourself laugh.
Every director had his own style. Clampett was crazy, Tex Avery was innovative, and brought the over-the-top humor to the cartoons by sometimes making fun of fairy tales. He definitely inspired Clampett's craziness, but Chuck was the opposite. Chuck was very minimalistic. He didn't have his characters do crazy over-the-top stuff like Clampett, and he didn't like having Bugs lose.
Tortoise beats hair? Tortoise beats hair? What? These screwy guys don't know what they're talking about. What, a big bunch of joints?
He had a specific formula. Bugs never directly attacks someone. He usually gets provoked. Daffy always loses, no matter how smart his scheme. At least started in 1950. And of course, the coyote never catches the roadrunner. Don't get me wrong, I definitely love Chuck's cartoons, but his formula gets old sometimes. Nowadays, Daffy Duck is known for being selfish and greedy, a character trait Chuck slowly gave the character, starting with the Scarlet Pumpernickel from 1950. But to be honest, I prefer the more crazy Daffy from the earlier cartoons, one of my favorites being A Pest in the House from the year 1947, which was written by two of my favorite Looney Tunes writers, Mike Maltese and Ted Pierce. The short has a very simple premise.
Just one more thing. I'm a tired man. I gotta have my sleep. Plenty of it. So see to it that I get lots of peace and quiet. Because if I'm disturbed at any time, I'm gonna bust you right in the nose!
So of course 1940 Daffy being 1940 Daffy, he makes things worse by trying to help, which only hurts poor old Elmer Fudd. Chuck and his unit were definitely at the top of their game by 1947. The expressions that annoyed man pulls are amazing. They show off Chuck's talent of telling a joke by a character's face alone really well. Chuck apparently redrew scenes like that constantly till he had the expressions he desired. The gags in the short are great too, my favorite gag being the one involving Daffy forgetting the punchline of a joke, or the almost mandatory How Dry I Am sequence. Background artist for this cartoon was a man by the name of Richard Morley. Morley only provided backgrounds in another cartoon previously, that one being 1946's Fair and Warmer, directed by Chuck Jones as well. He definitely wasn't as good as Maurice Noble or Gene Fleury and Bernice Polivka, but he still had some great drawings for the cartoon, like the panels of the elevator or the 2D staircase sequence. I really love Daffy in this because he isn't the crazy darnful duck he started as, but also not the later greedy duck. He just accidentally causes trouble for others, which I prefer, because I think that the later Daffy always losing due to his greedy personality became a bit boring and predictable, while his crazy start was a bit overdone and not that funny.
She's the flower of our coach.
Trip Along Daffy is one of the two Daffy and Porky westerns directed by Chuck Jones. It's probably one of my favorite Daffy and Porky team-ups, which involves the western-type hero and the comedy relief trying to clean up this one-horse town. The cartoon opens with an original song titled The Flower of Gower Gulch, Gower Gulch being an intersection in Hollywood. Chuck immediately introduces us to the western hero, the comedy relief, and of course, the lawless western town. The scene afterwards quickly shows the viewer how truly lawless this western town is. Chuck Jones shows off his directing talent by using the good old show don't tell method, and does it very well. He uses the gags to tell the story, like the Sheriff Wanted sign telling us what Daffy's goal is gonna be. The antagonist of this short is none other than Nasty Canasta, and he didn't have his iron that day, which is why he understandably chomps Daffy's gun. While Nasty Canasta is a generic western villain, I still really love his design. Something about those Chuck Jones directed side characters like Nasty Canasta or the wrestler from Bunny Hugged look really fun and loose. After meeting Canasta, Daffy tries to show off how tough he is by having Porky drink a mixture of Old Panther, Cobra Fang juice, and hydrogen bitters. Seeing that it had no effect on Porky, he decides to drink some himself, which of course make him and Porky sing Mary Had a Little Lamb before flying into the sky. Selfish Daffy might not be my favorite because of him losing to Bugs all the time, but I love when he loses to Porky Pig instead, because it's hilarious to see Daffy's know-it-all persona, for example in Duck Dodgers, just get torn apart by Porky's mere existing. Especially when the thing that causes Daffy to lose in this cartoon is Porky innocently playing with a toy soldier like a comedy relief should, which leads to him killing Nasty Canasta and becoming the new sheriff, while Daffy kinda gets what he wanted at the start. He cleans up this one-horse town. This short was written by Michael Maltese, who of course was a big reason these Chuck Jones cartoons worked so well. Mike was very well known for his fun wordplay, used in a very smart way in the Rabbit Hunting trilogy, or parodies Chuck loved to do every now and then like The Deuce You Say or What's Opera Doc. His writing is a great addition to what are already visually hilarious cartoons. These visuals were provided by some of Warner's greatest animators, like Ben Washam and Ken Harris. The background and layout artists for this cartoon were Robert Griberick and Phil DeGard. Their western-inspired backgrounds are really well done, which can be appreciated in the showdown between Daffy and Canasta. Just look at the angles these guys used here. They're straight out of a Frank Tashlin cartoon. Imagine finding a huge chunk of gold, but immediately getting ripped off by a bank. That's what happens to Bugs in Barbary Coast Bunny, written by one of Chuck's main writers, Ted Pierce, with Robert Griberick and Phil DeGard returning for background and layout duties. Not being one to take stuff like this lightly, Bugs decides to rob the returning Nasty Canasta of all of his riches. Bugs finds himself in a San Francisco saloon 6 months after the robbery takes place. That saloon is run by none other than Nasty Canasta himself. Bugs enters the saloon and acts like an aloof man who mistakes his slot machine for a telephone and wins the jackpot with his lucky rabbit foot.
Hi, Huckleberry. If you don't look like one of them newfangled, telephones. Pardon me, sir. But, could I use your, telephone?
Bugs continues to play the unassuming role and bets all his money on a marble game. And because this is a Chuck Jones cartoon, Bugs wins, and the gag of Bugs winning repeats itself until Canasta gets fed up and tries to kill Bugs. It just ends in Bugs getting richer and him getting shot in the head. The backgrounds in this cartoon are very stylized. They remind me of the flat UPA style with the Warner Bros. Twist, and the shot of San Francisco reminds me of a children's book cover. This was just a small look into Chuck's legendary career at Warner's. There's a good reason he's the most popular director of the Warner guys. His cartoons always had great style and fun plots. I didn't even get to mention more classics, like the Hunting trilogy, What's Opera Doc, Duck Amuck, and more.